Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Politics. Insert punchline to political views you disagree with. Let's start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Splitsville, the place to end a relationship, have dessert while you desert your lover at Splitsville. Welcome, everyone, to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. We are actors, and I've been a full-time filmmaker for the last, 11 years or so. Todd's a musician, a full-time producer for the last 50 years. Longer than he's been alive, he's been producing. He's just that talented.
Yep. Yep, that's right.
And this show is all about looking at a film and figuring out what we can learn as people behind and in front of the camera, as well as storytellers in general, and just, general review. The conversations can go anywhere. Like, we always do a really good job, I think, of staying on topic. Even if, we go astray, it's always tied back to the story, the theme, filmmaking in general. And so hopefully there's always something useful for creatives out there. I do think it's funny sometimes where conversations go, because last week I was editing the episode and I was just laughing to myself because a conversation that I thought would be a 30-second throwaway comment on my part ended up being like a 30-40 minute discussion just about whatever the impact of film. And I just thought it was funny because it completely outlived or outsized my actual opinion on the topic. Because we were talking about a film about kidnapping. And I thought it was interesting, how films can really have an impact and build out our imaginations and our worldview in subtle ways sometimes. And so I just kind of threw it away as this, I hope people, don't watch this and clutch their pearls, which I know we, beat this into the ground last week, but I don't think people do. I think it's just what you see can begin to take on a life of its own. Like, what you see can impact you in a way that's very subtle. It's not like, you walk away from any particular film, right? You don't walk away from John Wick thinking we live in a world full of assassins and anyone could get me at any given time. Not at all. But that doesn't also mean that there aren't actually assassins that exist in the world. They're probably just mediocre at it. They're either really, really, really amazing at it, or they're really bad and they're going to get caught, very quickly. That's probably more the reality, but there's no crazy hotels strung around the world, with whatever kind of secret society happening. I think whatever. And so I just find it interesting, not just where the conversation can go, but also, the small minor ways that film can influence our thinking, which I'm sure we'll get into today at some point. But there's also conversations that will go somewhere you really can't predict, such as what I'm about to tee up right now. So I've finished a couple of films recently, one of which I'll talk about at the end of this episode, but the other of which I'll probably talk on next week. And that second film was a slice of life from my childhood. I was 13 and something happened, and I made the bad decision of turning it into a film, and for reasons I won't go into. But what's interesting, and I was 13 in 1994, and in junior high, earlier that year, of that same year that this other event happened, there was something else happening in my town, of tiny Texas town, literally less than 1,500 people in the city limits. And what was happening was our school went to the Final Four in basketball. Went to the Final Four. That's huge. I mean, in any state, I'm sure that's big. In Texas, this is a really large state with a lot of competition. So making it to the Final Four is a really big deal. And do you know who our head coach was, Todd? I'll give you one guess who the head coach of Somerville, Texas high school basketball was.
John Popovich.
That would have been crazy. But, Greg,
That's my guess.
Yeah. It was
John Wick.
Rodney. John Wick. It was Rodney Terry who just became the men's head coach basketball at UT. And it's really cool because he stepped in, coaching as an assistant. The head coach fell into all kinds of crazy stuff, and he took over as interim coach and just led UT men's basketball to an Elite Eight appearance where they finally said, hey, we're going to give you a actual contract. You're no longer interim. You're now the chosen head coach for the next several years. And so my hometown is crazy because that's where he started his coaching career as a head coach. That was his first head coach position, was at my high school. And he's an amazing dude. Like, he was really young. I had no idea how young he was. I heard people talk around, town about he's a playboy, this and that. But what was interesting though was I was in junior high, but he would still come down because in his mind he's building a program, and so he would come down to coach us at junior high, a couple times a week and show us how to run a play, right? Because if you teach a 7th grader how to run your plays, then when they get to 10th, 11th, 12th grade, they're just executing blindly. It's just second nature. And so he was building a program, and so he'd come down and coach us. And I would think he wouldn't remember me, but as it turns out, about a decade later, I was I was between tech jobs and was working at a Jewish community center, and was overseeing as a regular employee, not like a manager or anything, but the facilities for sports. Like, they had a gym, basketball gym, and also like a weightlifting gym. And so I just, clean equipment, help people work out, spot them or whatever, kick them when they're not looking, make sure they really earn their reps. And I walk into the gym one day, and the UT men's basketball team is in there. And I'm like, what is going on? And then from the other side of the gym, this coach looks up at me, and from across the gym, he's like, Heidenreich? And I was like, what is Coach Terry doing here? And he comes over. It's crazy to remember someone not just 10 years after you coached them, but after they've gone from being a little kid to a full grown man. And he did. He remembered me, and we talked, we caught up. He asked about my brother because as a small town coach, like 2A, it was very small. He was also, coaching football, which is where my brother played. And so, yeah, we caught up, and I was like, man, what's going on in here? And he's like, bro, the Michael Dell hired out the men's basketball team to play with his son for his birthday. I'm like,
oh my God. Wow. Unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. If only I was a billionaire. I too could afford a D1 men's team to just hang out. Like, hey,
that is such a
ridiculous
thing. That is such a ridiculous, I can't even put into words how ridiculous that is. Okay,
it
whatever.
Was amazing. Yeah, and I met him. He was a cool guy. Like, he, whatever, shook my hand and
sure
had small talk. Yeah, but hilarious what money can do for you. And so
that's amazing he remembered you.
Yeah, it really is. Like, good guy. I cannot imagine how lucky those guys are in college to have someone like that. It's those kind of people that really help you, feel seen and feel a part, of life, let alone, the being in sports is such a huge gift to young men for sure. And hopefully for young women as well. But as a young man, like, you have so many hormones and testosterone that's looking for an outlet. And so I think it's really important for guys to play sports and learn how to cooperate with other men and be led as well as be a leader. These are really important things that not everyone gets to experience. And so, yeah, my town is going crazy for Coach Terry. And so we're really excited and rooting for him for sure. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. What a great story. Just don't stop. Just keep going. And you never know where you're going to end up, right?
Hell yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. You know what he wasn't?
What?
He was no dictator, Todd. Smooth.
That was a great segue. So yeah, if you haven't seen The Great Dictator, the 1940 version, I don't know if there's a version after that. I don't know.
I don't think so.
If you haven't seen it, pause this episode, go watch it. It is streaming on HBO Max because we're going to spoil a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, we'll look at some of the stuff. Definitely touch on some of the cinematography. We'll talk about old aspect ratios, as well as look at a classic glow up that they gave for Hannah. And then touch on some of the story and writing, the way they destroy something beautiful, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. Dictator Adenoid Hynkel tries to expand his empire while a poor Jewish barber tries to avoid persecution from Hynkel's regime. Written and directed by Charles Chaplin, cinematography by Karl Struss and Roland Totheroh, featuring Charles Chaplin as Hynkel and the barber, Paulette Goddard as Hannah, Jack Oakie as Dictator Napaloni, Reginald Gardiner as Schultz, and Billy Gilbert as Herring.
I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!
Yeah. So, okay, I'll start. So I will say, I mean, I've never seen this film. Obviously I've seen the speech and, it's moving, and I had never seen it before like the internet kind of
Right.
like did that whole mashup a couple of years ago, or not mashup, but like put this amazing music to it. And I was just blown away, like unbelievable that this was, 80 years ago that, and it's still so pertinent today. All the machine references and the plane and reference and all that stuff. And so just addressing just the speech before the film, I know that the few little things I know about this film, I know Charlie Chaplin made it. He put a lot of his own money on the line to make this film. And it was debated whether or not to keep that speech in at the end. Yeah,
Wow.
because it's such a departure from the rest of the film. It's like,
I debated because I was like, you know what? It's such, obviously it's, become iconic in recent years because of the internet and, the eye-opening level of watching something being said before the U.S. was even entered into World War II. And this was only shortly after it had begun in the first place. He only invaded Poland about a year before this was released. And Hitler, that is, not Charlie Chaplin,
Right.
did not invade Poland. But the rest of the film, the drama is pretty light. It's all comedy, with light flourishes of drama. And so I debated even using this as our starting clip because of that reason, but it's just still so good. But I had no idea that, like you're saying, that they were thinking about cutting it because of that reason.
I mean, look, if you step back and you look at it from a point of view of making a movie, this does not fit. It's a complete 180 from the rest of the movie. And it's in my opinion that this 3.5 minutes, whatever it is, are the only reason he made this film.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he wanted to say this, but he's Charlie Chaplin, who he's made his career on comedy, on physical comedy, right? Like that's what he's known for, right? And I want to say this is the first or one of the first audio films he did, right?
Yeah, this was his first foray into the talkies.
Okay.
And he had made other films during the time of, sound sync, but this was his first, like, you know what, I'm actually going to do a full talkie.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, what a way to start out of the gate to have that. I mean, okay, let me talk about the film for a second. So there are some things that I noticed that I loved, and some things that I just couldn't, they were just difficult, right? I think that the stuff that was difficult, I'll say, is just some of the on the nose attempt at humor. Like, I hated when they bit into the mustard, that whole scene where they're throwing themselves around on the couch, and I hated it. It was awful. That being said, most of the comedy, I know, like I got by. Like, it was like, look, it's 1940. Like, yeah, I could see in 1940 this would have been funny and stuff. And some of the stuff was was hilarious. I loved the upside down plane bit. I thought that was brilliant and wonderful at the beginning. But yeah, so anyway, so some of the comedy was really difficult for me to get by. That being said, all of the satire, all of the making fun of, like, the references to Mussolini, right? The Napaloni, Mussolini, all of, like, the swastika, the replacement for the swastika, right? Like, with the pluses,
Yeah.
but they wore them on their arm. The ballet dance that Hynkel did with the globe is brilliant. Like, all of these, and the way he spoke, quote unquote, German, right, was on it, like, brilliant. I would challenge you to do that for a good minute, which is what he did in these speeches. 2 minutes of just gibberish German sounding sounds, right?
Yes. In fact, let's listen to one of these, his first speech, because it's just genius.
He was ignorant of the profound change that had come over Tomania. Hynkel, the dictator, ruled the nation with an iron fist. Under the new emblem of the double cross, liberty was banished, free speech was suppressed, and only the voice of Hynkel was heard.
Hey, das Strafnichtshilfensekt! der Wiener Schnitzel mit der Lage werden und das Sauerkraut. Hey, der Fluten sagt der Fleppen. Und Tomenia wie ein Strapf. Und der Blitzen sagt der Klutz. Hey, ich blei noch straff mit der... Malone.
Sauerkraut, like come on, Wiener Schnitzel.
Lagen.
It's brilliant.
Oh.
It's absolute brilliance that it, like, and it's so great that he like that's how he starts that like his talkies, right? Is he like he says, I have had a lot to say, and now I'm going to use this platform to say it in a funny way, and then at the very end, and in a way that's going to transcend time, right? Like and generations. It was pretty noticeable even back then. You've talked a lot on this podcast about the 180 rule, and I really saw that here. I mean, in every way, it was almost like a sitcom, right? From let's on the street, we're always looking this direction, same direction on the street, whether we're in a building or outside of a building, it's always this same direction. Even when they're on the roof of the building, we don't break the 180 rule. When they're looking at the barbershop burn, we're, at an angle, but we never break the 180 rule. Like I always feel like I'm looking in this specific direction. Now, it's 1940. So I don't think that they were trying to break that at all. I think they were purposefully staying that way.
Yeah. I mean, if you want, I'll jump in real quick and just say, I think it probably has as much or more to do with the camera itself, because it's just this behemoth, massive thing. And they're doing these nice dolly shots. And so in order to really take advantage of, camera movement at all, you're basically eating up half the room with these huge, arc lights that are lighting your set. And so there's just almost no practical way. I mean, there might be one scene that breaks the 180 rule, which is when right before they go to this meeting, right? Hynkel is waiting for Napaloni, and they're doing that whole conversation about, I figured out how to make you the man, right? He's going to sit in the seat and you're going to be looking down on him. And that whole physical comedy killed me. But in the setup, we start that scene, I think, behind Hynkel, and then we jump to the other side of the desk. But otherwise, like that massive camera, and I'll put up a picture of a BTS shot of Chaplin looking through the camera lens, because it's a honker. Like that thing is a beast.
I believe it.
Yeah.
But I think it played to the strength. It was like a strong move. Whether it was motivated or not, I think it just speaks to us. It speaks to filmmaking in general and for human beings, right? We need that frame of reference of what direction are we looking? Where are we? And they establish it really well, I guess is the point I was just trying to make. That like I felt that, and it felt grounded. I felt, like I was in this space and this is where I'm living, and I wasn't going to be challenged, and that was okay because I'm just trying to follow this story. I thought Hannah, Paulette Goddard was wonderful in this film. Just such a strong female character and presence, and really like bolstered the barber. I love that the barber didn't have a name. It really just gave a voice to the people, especially with his speech at the end. He was the people. And how he was just because he didn't know about the invasion, Hynkel's invasion and everything, because he had amnesia. He just was fighting, like, I don't like, how dare you do this? And he would like hit the guards and stuff. And, so he wasn't scared at all. It was like, he was just fighting for himself. And I love those little touches. I thought it was like really, really brilliant. There was some great physical comedy, like when he's carrying everything and he walks out onto the ledge on the roof. I thought that was really great physical comedy. It was some very smart lines, like, the scene you just talked about with Napoli, when he's saying, I have ways to for you to tower over him when he's sitting down and he's going to walk across the entire hall. Like that's actually really thought out, right? And it's stuff that I think that, dictators would do. I love that he found ways to make fun of all of those things, right? From even in the argument when he's talking about, you move your troops and then I'll sign. Okay, you sign and then I'll move my troops. And then they just go back and forth and in there and they start fighting and arguing. It's like, and then the guy says, just sign it. He'll move his troops and then we'll invade. Like, what's the problem? And the train stopping when Napaloni comes into the train station and then keeps going and it like keeps moving. It just all of these, you find these moments and like, okay, how can we make that off the wall, like weird thing, stupid thing that might happen or probably would never happen, but it's just going to be funny in this moment.
I think my favorite physical gag was when Hynkel literally climbs a curtain. Like,
oh yeah,
why?
And actually, why exactly? And I remember when I was watching that, I was thinking, how did they do that practically? This is 1940. This is not. There's no, there's something back there that he's holding on to or whatever that's lifting him up or raising him.
I would
down.
think so. I had that same thought because it's so seamless and his physical, demeanor makes it look like he's really scaling this curtain, which would clearly fall. And my best guess is there's a rope with a little noose at the end of it that maybe he steps into.
Yeah,
pulls him up. And so he has to physically, whatever it is, hold on to something. But that's probably the cheapest way you could get away with that, by my estimation.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, and remembering the time when this was made, with the World War II going on, and it just is at first I was really worried. I was watching it thinking, oh my gosh, this is not going to be, but once it got past that first opening, war scene, I was much more in when we had actual characters that I knew we were going to stay with, when more, things started happening. So after the first maybe 20 minutes or so, I was pretty into it. It's a long movie. It's over 2 hours long and it's every bit of that. Right. Yeah. So the credits are at the beginning. There's no credits at the end. I remember watching it thinking, how much is left here? And there was like 30 seconds left and he was still talking. And I'm like, what is going on? It was interesting, but there was the way they use music for transitions, not to, not usually to give you any kind of feeling during a scene, which was interesting because a lot of times there was just silence, especially at the very beginning, like when the bullet falls out of the cannon and it's just laying there and he's told to go up to it and it's turning and pointing at him as he's running around. There's zero sound. And this is one of the scenes that you see. And I'm sitting here thinking, what is going to happen for the next hour and 50 minutes? Because there's like zero sound. And I just haven't been in a situation where I've been watching a film with zero sound. So, but obviously that changed as the film goes on. So to me, just as a film watcher, it felt a little disjointed at times because of that, because at the end, the speech at the end completely puts the film into a whole nother category, like changes everything. And it doesn't let me sit there long enough. Right. So there's the speech and then he's calling to her and she's looking up at the sky and then it ends. Like we never sit in a world where there's this much drama that long throughout the entire movie. Like you said, there's these microbursts of drama, but it's always counteracted by comedy. So it's like the opposite of what a drama would be, where you have these microbursts of comedy and then, mostly drama. But if you put yourself in that position where you have a drama and then there's microbursts of comedy, imagine having 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes of comedy at the end. And that's how it ends. Like it feels, whoa, like that's not what I signed up for. So I'm glad it was made, and I'm glad he did what he did, and he kept the speech in, but I just wish it would have been a little bit more dramatic throughout, I guess is what I'd say.
No, that's fair. I think there's so much to talk about in this film. Like, for one, I was laughing like out loud. I didn't expect that. I expected kind of like what you were talking about with the hot mustard scene, where it's like, okay, I get it. He's doing the whole tramp bit, and that's fine. But there's so many other moments where I was just really rolling. Some of it was for the physical comedy, and I was like, this guy is just a genius, like an actual genius. And some of it was just witty, like a lot of the contrast is where, so much of the comedy comes from, because we open in the middle of a war, right? World War One. It opens in 1918. And I love even before we get to that, they have the on-screen text, the scroll. And even that's pretty funny. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick, because opening text, because it's just kind of being silly on itself. Obviously, like, note any resemblance between Hynkel, the dictator, and the Jewish barber is purely coincidental, which obviously not. But the next one is what kind of got me a little bit, because of its, I don't know, we're talking about war, and I'm sure tensions were high in this era. And what he says next is, this is a story of a period between two world wars, an interim in which insanity cut loose, liberty took a nosedive, and humanity was kicked around somewhat. like just the whole at the final button being somewhat, war happens, people, somewhat. So it's already adding levity to a really serious, topic for sure. But then it opens in like the trenches and barbed wires everywhere. And as we pan over, men are firing guns, and these shirtless men are now loading this massive cannon. And as they finish loading the cannon, we pan back to where we just were, and it was empty. But now it's Chaplin. It's just already like hilarious, because he's such a sore thumb. You're just like, whoa, I did not expect to see you there, sir. And the way he like even pulls the cable to fire the first round has got this kind of flamboyant flourish to it, and it's just like and bang, and it's just so physically funny, and it keeps playing with some of that tonal contrast after we cut away from the war. As you said, like, he comes to whatever era this is, the mid to late 30s, and he's got amnesia, and we established that with this awkward interim sequence between this doctor looking for him, and he's like, yeah, he's got amnesia, he's been out of it since the war, since 1918, and so he doesn't know what's going on now. He's in for a surprise. Yeah, you betcha. Like, it's just all exposition, so that when we cut to him, we understand that, as you said, he has no idea that the times have changed, and he's thinking these cops are supposed to be just good cops. He thinks he still equals with the Tomanians, and he has no idea why people are writing Jew on his window. And I love that he goes in like, oh, well, who did this? Time to clean it up. He's just completely innocent, as anyone should be, and walking through life. And we see that scene escalate to him about to get hanged off a street light. And what happens is his old buddy, the pilot, comes out of nowhere and sees him, and he's like, whoa, I know this guy. He's a friend of mine. And he's like, you're a Jew? I always thought you were Aryan. He's like, well, I'm vegetarian. like,
so good.
It's so good. And then he's like, you don't remember? You saved my life. And this slow dawn of realization creeps over his face as he says, oh, yes, I remember now. Well, how are you? Like, it just goes into this immediate comedy punch, and it's such brilliant timing, because that's all comedy is a lot of the time, is just timing, as the old joke goes. And those moments just caught me off guard. The other thing is, this was released in 1940. I saw one commenter say that he started working on this in 1937. I didn't find exactly when he began working on it, but that tracks. Like if this came out in 40, you're probably starting it, in 37, maybe finish writing it in 38. You got to build all these sets and figure out all your casting, wardrobe, locations. Like that's a lot of time, so that you're filming in 1939 and then editing. And some of these edits are really smooth, actually. Whenever you think about like the final speech, we dissolve in the middle of his speech to see Hannah in the field, just trying to recover. That dissolve isn't as easy as it is now. You can't just, shift D and suddenly these two clips are, dissolving between each other. Like that's a physical chemical process they had to do. So when you see there's a little jump that happens right before the dissolve, and it's because they have to, safely make sure we can erase and literally wipe away some of the image a little bit at a time, so that over the course of whatever, 20 frames, you can gradually erase the image off the celluloid so that it transitions. And, that's a chemical process. It takes time to get it right. And it's really cool that they were doing that in 1940.
Is that how they did that? That's crazy.
Yeah. Really, really tricky stuff. And yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, a lot of visual effects back in the day were like that in terms of, some other films would, whatever, Ben-Hur or Moses' Great Ten Commandment thing, like you're drawing on the film. Like you would have to literally draw onto the film itself in order to do your visual effects. And that takes a lot of thought and foresight and precision for sure. And so if things always look a little imperfect, that's why, because it's a literal, organic, imperfect process. And so that he was thinking about this stuff in the, as early as maybe 37 shows that he was way ahead. Like that speech, even thinking about 1940, forget, okay, fine. He was on the right side of history with Hitler and Jews. And even in America, like that was, I'm assuming it sounds like, contentious, but we're nowhere near the end of Jim Crow. And he's talking about treating black people as equals, and doing whatever you can. Like, I'm sure he's got skeletons in the closet, like almost everyone else in history. But my God, he was really ahead of the curve, to almost everyone in his contemporary, because it's not like he's Jewish. He didn't have a stake in the game. There's no reason he had, a personal, assignment to make sure he came out okay. No, he just really said, I just have a conscience and this is the way I see the world. And this is the way I have to step up and say something. And of course, within a couple of years, everyone was, of course, like, screw Hitler, and let alone all the crazy Nazi rallies that were happening around the country. There's that famous, I think now it's famous, 1939 Times Square Nazi rally that happened, that was caught on film, and like all kinds of crazy stuff. So just the fact that also we once again, had an era where an actor could write and direct and, distribute his film. Distributing, I think, was its own challenge. Like, people in 1940 were thinking, this is never going to play in London. This is not going to play in America. Like, no one's going to stand for this kind of messaging. And because there were still a lot of sympathetic people to Hitler. And there's even nods that they knew what was going on. There's that whole sequence of of whoever it was, his buddy, the scientist, creating like the worst inventions ever, right? The bulletproof silk, and he just kills a guy, the parachute hat, and once again kills a guy.
Oh my God.
And then at this point, Hynkel's like done with them, and he comes back and he's like, we got this gas, man, it can kill lots of people. He's like, yeah, go away. And it's like, well, it seems like we knew, right? And so I think a lot of the stuff we see in contemporary times paints like what was happening over in World War in Germany as, a surprise when we got over there. And maybe not. I don't know. I'm sure people like Joe Howes would have much more detailed information about what we knew and when we knew it and how public it was. But yeah, there's a lot to indicate that we knew exactly what was going on over there. And so, yeah, I have a world of respect for Chaplin, not just because, you know, he's got a great conscience. He's the gall to put his money on the line and his reputation. And that's the cool thing too, is he did it, and maybe it was just impossible for him to not get away with it, but he doesn't know that. Like, you have all the goodwill because you're arguably the largest movie star in the world. I don't know who else would be your competition. I don't know if the Marx Brothers are doing their thing yet or not, but I imagine there's no bigger name in the world than Charlie Chaplin. And for him to be like, I'll risk it. Let's do it. My money, my reputation. Let's go.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
No fear.
None, dude. That's so cool. Yeah, I'm sure we'll circle back to that later. But I also looked at that. I think it's funny that we were doing the whole, we as a society, we're doing the whole glow up, even back in the 40s, right? This is the she's all that level of storytelling, right? Let's turn Hannah, who's clearly gorgeous, and pretend she's not, right? Let's put oil on her face and her hair's up in a bun. Oh, we washed her face and put her hair down, and now she's like smoking hot all of a sudden to everyone. Like, that's so funny. And I just found like not revisionist, but like this historical look back at, you know, just the way you go for the easy, low-hanging fruit in storytelling sometimes. And I don't begrudge Chaplin that for sure. A little harder to get away with that nowadays. If someone does that now, it better be as a punchline, not as some kind of serious effort to make, you know, whatever Chris Evans look like the dork. And suddenly,
yeah, exactly. I mean, in 1940, I'm sure like you think, oh, let's just put her hair up and make it messy, and then some smudges on her face, and that's good. You're good.
And the extra flourish that they did that I love is they also did this kind of dreamy, hazy visual lens, right? The highlights are blooming, and I don't know exactly how they would have done that in 40. Probably a couple of ways. I don't know what petroleum jelly on the lens looks like. I know that was a technique back then, but I would think the easiest way is probably to remove. In film, you have what's called an anti-halation backing or layer, and which the goal of which is when light passes through the film, you don't want it to hit the back of the camera and then ricochet right back through it. That starts to distort your image. Instead, you want the light to hit the film once and stop. And so you have like a backing at the very back that stops the light. And you'll also add maybe an extra layer of anti-halation to just make sure that the highlights stay preserved as they are. Whereas if you remove that layer, the backing, what ends up happening is the highlights bloom and it creates this kind of glow around all the highlights. And that's a nice storytelling technique. What should be a fault in the process now becomes an opportunity to tell your story. Well, okay, maybe we don't want that all the time, but what if we do it at a specific time? Well, suddenly it's got this heavenly look. And so maybe you can do the afterlife, right? With this glowy, hazy kind of texture to the film. Or this girl in overalls and coveralls suddenly, you know, looks beautiful because she's whatever in a dress and has her hair done and face cleaned. And now let's give her this glow, right? This you know, beautiful kind of halo effect all over the place. And now it's suddenly, you know, strum the harp, you know, let's go. Yeah. And so little simple things, people can still do that with film, I think, depending on the film stock you're using. Not a lot of people do it. I mean, I think it's probably something that you must really want to do. It almost comes across as pretentious to do it now because you can do similar stuff in post. There's just not a lot of reason to do it. Now, if you're a purist like Christopher Nolan, I respect it. Do your thing. I think he still does his coloring process through chemical baths, which before digital age, that's what you used to do. You used to run it through, if you wanted it to have a sepia look, you might just run it through brown color wash a few times to give it a more brown texture. And so the whole color timing was literal timing, how long you left it exposed in the chemicals. And then you try to match shots based on, the exposure time. All kinds of mathematical things were happening to make sure your film looked artistically the way you wanted it to look. And so back in the day, that was the norm, and now not so much, except for probably one filmmaker in the world. Christopher Nolan. I've not heard, maybe that's just because I just haven't heard, but I haven't heard anyone else still doing chemical baths. And so it's kind of cool to still see modern films released with that process in mind. Yeah. Dope. There was one moment, I know that end, the final speech is just a beautiful and punch in the stomach and all the things. There is one other moment that really took my breath out, which was, it wasn't when everyone was being cruel, like they're throwing tomatoes at her and she's, cowering down. That's brutal. It doesn't feel good. Don't get me wrong. But it's also a little bit of expected. Like you're like, okay, yeah, that's part and parcel with this kind of story. But the thing that really shocked me was when Hynkel, yeah, almost, is trying to negotiate with Napaloni, and his Schultz, I think it is, right, who says we need to remove the restrictions on Jews and we need to give them equality again. And this is after the tomato incident and and the cop incident, after they almost strung up the barber. And then we go back to the ghetto and we see them walking down the street and everyone's being polite. And she drops her potatoes, and instead of taking them, they help her pick them up. And her reaction to it.
Amazing.
Oh, that one hits. I was like, man, I didn't expect that, because you get into this mode of being treated a certain way. And as a viewer, I'm expected that to persist. And even after he repeals or removes the edicts about how to treat, people in the ghetto, I still expect the men on the street to still think they're better than you. And like, okay, we have our orders, but we're going to treat you the way we think you should be treated anyway. And for my expectation there to be upset was just a kick. I was like, whoa. And it really reveals, and it's playing on what a grip the dictator had on his men. And also the impact that it had on that community was really profound, because even as things progress, we see right before the demonstration in the ghetto takes place, we can see the people, Hannah and the barber, begin to change their minds too. They're like, maybe Hynkel isn't so bad. Oh, we'll take 2 buttons, please. Right. And you can start to see, and this is where destroying something beautiful really has a really great effect, because we're starting to have something else wonderful crop up, which is love in the time of war. You have Hannah and the barber, falling in love and finding something special in this really terrible time. And they're going on a date. Okay, yay. No, actually, terrible, right? And everything, let's destroy this. And it's such a great storytelling mechanism to give you hope, to give you something wonderful. And it's, I think, a reflection of what Schultz is saying right before he thinks he's going to die at the beginning of the film. As he starts waxing poetic about his wife at home. She's probably in the garden. Oh, and she can never pick those daisies, because to her, cutting a daisy is like taking a life. Fast forward, taking lives. Like, it's all just this beautiful interwoven, like beauty is beauty kind of tone. Yeah, that's a really wonderful technique of let's create hope and then snuff it out as much as we can, before we give you something good. Let's actually remind you of what the order of the day is. Yeah, a lot of really smart storytelling techniques.
Yeah, I was at first shocked when he said, "Oh, well, let's just change how we treat them." But then I I think that was also a funny, like something that was kind of funny, which is like, you know, it's kind of a really stupid random thing to think of to persecute them in the first place, persecute Jewish people in the first place. So why wouldn't it be just as random to say, okay, well, let's not do that anymore. Right. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just very kind of a stupid assumption that anybody is less than you because of the color of their skin anyway. So it should be just as dumb a reason to stop doing that. And then I also expected like there to be backlash from the you know, the soldiers and stuff. Like, wait a minute, no, we do hate these people, but there wasn't. And I think that was probably, maybe it wasn't a conscious decision, but it was probably a conscious decision just because like of his speech at the end. Don't just do what they say because they're machine. They take away your life. They turn you into machines. You know, don't be a machine. You know, don't just say, I hate Jewish people because I tell you that they're bad. Don't just say just don't just agree with me because I'm you're my subordinate, you know, be a human being. But he's calling that out because they're like, okay, now we'll help you pick up your potatoes and, you know, be nice to you because this higher up guy says that I should. Like, so he's just calling out that in a way. So, but I didn't expect that. I expected there to be some kind of backlash, but there wasn't. I loved that moment that you called out of them getting the buttons, buying the buttons, and then hearing Hynkel like basically change his mind in this awful speech. He's like, nah, I'm gonna give this back to you. There you go. You know, and probably what I thought was the best physical comedy for me was the scene or the shot right after that, where he's like, he drops his hat and then he's going back to get it. And then the guy, the one soldier comes up and he's going to attack him, but he slips through him and slides through that kind of window under him, behind him. I was like, whoa, that's gymnast type shit right there. It was awesome.
Yeah, he's God and such a risk taker. Some of the, you know, his older stuff is just like, how did you not die like a dozen times? Just incredible. I mean, and it's interesting. His speech is also fascinating because he seems to be, on the one hand, kind of this and it's a lot of nuance. He's obviously a very, very smart man. And so I don't want to simplify it, but if you were to simplify it, it looks like he's anti-industrialist, because if you factor in modern times being some kind of commentary about the industrial age and reducing men to cogs in the machine, right, is literally what he's saying. And then, you know, you combine that with what he's saying about machines, it sounds like he's being very literal. And I think to some degree he might have been very literal. But at the same time, he's not anti-progress, because he also says at the end of that, you know, let's use science, let's use progress for the betterment of all mankind, so that, you know, we can provide for each other. Like it's a really fantastic, nuanced worldview that he's espousing. And I don't know that he and I would probably see eye to eye on everything, and that's fine. I don't need that out of anyone I'm in, you know, friendship with, let alone anyone art that I'm consuming. And so I respect that, you know, he's got a view. It takes a mind to see and think through what his view actually might be, and still agree or disagree. Like, there's still so much fundamentally you can't disagree with, like just basic equality, humanity, and everyone. It's God, he's so good. The other thing, God, if I can remember it, I didn't take any notes. I really wanted to vibe off of watching it the one time, because it was such a, you know, singular experience to actually sit and watch a Chaplin film for the first time. And I mean, I just loved the hell out of it. But this being in 1940, the other thing that's interesting that we don't often think about in context of World War II is the propaganda aspect. Like, film media it seems like if you were to do an actual historical analysis, thinking about the impact film made on the world, it's probably much, much more significant than we usually think about it. Because this was, Hitler did a phenomenal job of using it to rile his people up, to promote, bad intel, right? To make it seem like everything is going great for Germany. And there's a lot of documentaries that he was releasing at the time. And it's just so funny because nowadays, right, even within the last couple of years, even within the last couple of months, like we constantly are aware of how media is being used against us. And we're thinking like, oh, whatever, misinformation is being put out, about whatever, vaccines or, the president or foreign leaders or whatever. Like it's constantly in our psyche that it's being misallocated in some way or another. Why wouldn't we also assume that was the case, 80 years ago? Because I think we just look at Hitler as being this incredible orator, and with an iron fist, and don't really consider the tools at his disposal. And film was a really big one. That's more and more the conclusion that I've been coming to. And again, I'm not aware of any documentaries or books or anything that have done a deep dive into the impact of the creation and distribution of film, the ease of access, right? We talk a lot about the democratization of media nowadays, right, with the digital revolution. But film getting on its first legs back then, massive deal. Big deal. And war photography was becoming a thing, right? And documenting wars and proving to people like this is going on. This is what's happening in Germany. Like that was a big deal. And so, yeah, the use and the impact of, Soviets and probably America too. I mean, you look at D.W. Griffith, who's a very contentious historical filmmaker, because he's responsible for Birth of a Nation, which effectively revitalized and crazy, impact on the KKK. It was basically just this fledgling thing until Birth of a Nation came out. And it's not clear to me if he was a racist. It could have been he was just making a really interesting, crazy film. I don't know. Again, of course, it wouldn't surprise me if someone like that made that movie is an actual racist and was happy to see the recurrent, but I don't know. My point isn't so much that I know exactly who was doing what and why. It's that I think it's worth analyzing and factoring in the impact that the tools of the time probably had into the world at large. World War II didn't happen in a vacuum. And what, the impact, once again, back to back. And if anything, I wish I could invert this conversation versus last week's, because the impact is so much bigger on this one. When you look at, what transpired over the course of a decade, it shifted the entire world. The entire world got upended in the course of, 10 short years. Yeah. So I don't know. I think I punched myself out.
No, it's so important to keep in mind when this was made and also why.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, one of the amazing things about Chaplin was just his ability to see everyone as equal and everyone as deserving of the same opportunity as what he has, which is, I think in a lot of ways sorely lacking in, I guess in a lot of places, but especially in like Hollywood and today. And like, it's very hard, to find artists who will make something because it needs to be made for the world rather than because they need to make it. And to put their, if they have a lot of money, to put that where their mouth is, the way that Chaplin did that here. And also I think, it says a lot about like why he did comedy in the first place. Like, doesn't matter if you are rich or poor or old or young, you can watch Chaplin and laugh. And so he's like trying to give the world something, I just felt like that's what this was through. It was also like yes, there's bad things happening, but we're gonna find a way to make it something that everyone can laugh at, in a time when it's really hard to laugh at anything, and to also make Hitler seem small, and to literally attack the regime, and the ideology of that. And I think that it was done very directly and fearlessly, and like you said, calling out that this terrible stuff is happening, but at this same time giving the world something to smile at. It just was kind of like, I don't know, it's like so brilliant in a time in the 40s. You also have to remember, there was no wokeness, there was no, like everybody has a voice, it was like illegal to be gay, and it was such a different time to be a woman, and like all of these things that we are not the same now. And so to make like Hannah so powerful, like she was such a powerful character in this film, a powerful woman in this film. And yes, she had a role of like cleaning and cooking and stuff, but she was active in this film. Like she was like, I'm not going to stand by and just cook. I'm going to participate in this. I'm going to save the man, the almost hopeless man.
Yeah.
And she does. And I think that just says a lot about, his just worldview and his attempt to give something to the world, to leave it better than how he found it.
I loved your comment you made a second ago about attacking Hitler. What a great idea. Humor as a weapon. Like that's layered thinking, that we just don't get a lot of, because it's so much easier to puff your chest out and say, fight me. It's really hard to win against someone who's just making a joke. That's a bullet that's, you can't deflect. It just tacks you on a whole different plane of existence. And that's just genius, because that was his weapon of choice. And of course he buys ink by the barrel, right? Because he's a writer, he's a comedian, and he can do this all day. And I think he wanted to hear what Hitler thought of his film, and he never found out. But there is someone who said that Hitler watched it twice, but he never released a thought or opinion on it. And yeah, that's so good, because humor it's universal. And you know what? That's the other interesting thing about film in this era is talkies came through, right? Sound sync, the ability to record audio and sound at the same time, contributed to the aspect ratio. So we look at, this being the Academy aspect, and it's this weird, fraction of a thing, because initially it was wider as a 4:3 aspect ratio originally, and then as they got sound onto the film strip, it meant you had to squeeze the image over to make space for the sound, and then whenever you did that, it made the image taller, and so they kind of just truncated the image a little bit to make it slightly more 4:3-ish, even though it's not exactly, and that gave birth to this aspect ratio. But before sound was the mainstay, like. And so up until maybe the 60s, like all films are in this Academy aspect ratio, this kind of more squarish, ratio. But it's interesting because the first sound sync film that made everyone say, "Oh my God, like sound is cool," it's called The Jazz Singer. It came out in 1927, and so it had been floating around before they figured out like a process to really get this all to work in harmony. And it's a challenge because if you've seen like Babylon, you can kind of see the challenge of making sure you're recording sound well, and so the sound also has to be choreographed. Like if your back is to the camera, the audio isn't going to capture you. And so it becomes not just, cinematography is really important, but also how you block your actor so that whoever's talking is getting the best angle at the at the microphone. Like that's a whole other animal of figuring out how to make a good movie.
Wow.
It's intense, man. But really cool nonetheless, that was a technical process married with the artistic process. And so it doesn't surprise me that someone like Chaplin is coming and thinking about how can I elevate my craft in a way that is telling my story, telling my perspective, while winning over my audience, who is probably 50-50 on my views in the first place, and do it in a way that doesn't lose the thread and still makes this an enjoyable. Like he is balancing a globe on his butt. Like it's just, it's really impressive, which also really tickled me because I was like, I really hope he bounces it off his ass.
And he does it twice.
He does it twice.
So great. So great. Oh, and what a metaphor, right? I mean, it's perfect. And then it pops and he's so sad. It's just so, and he cried, he like on the desk, like a child. It's so on the nose and brilliant. And other films have done it since. I mean, I think like Jojo Rabbit did something like that, and like a couple other films. And I noticed that it kind of felt like listening to the Beatles for the first time, where, you're like, oh, that's where that came from. Yes. Oh, that's where that came from.
The whole dictation bit where he's talking to the secretary and he's like, Robin Stockman, Login, tick, tick. And then he says,
and then
Harvard Hobby.
It's so like, oh my, there were so many things, even the short chair bit, there's so many things about it where I thought, oh, that must have been the first time this is done. Oh, that was done 50 years before I saw it, It just felt like listening to the Beatles for the first time, and hearing, like Sgt. Pepper. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is a heavy metal. This is rock and roll. This is country. This is all of these genres first. This is unbelievable. This blues, and that's what it felt like. It was like really wonderful. At first I was very hesitant, but then as it got into it, I was like, frustrated at my children for being loud. Like, guys, I'm trying to watch this, So anyway, it was great. It was great.
I loved it. I'm glad we did it. It's one of those where I can imagine watching it again at some point. Definitely want to show it to, a person here or there, and maybe even just reference it. Honestly, the physical comedy is so smart, and light-handed, and it's so hard to make it look that easy. That's the hardest thing, is watching him do some of these bits and it looks simple. It looks effortless instead of dangerous. Like, I don't know if he had a safety net below him on that little plank, the little metal beam, but I'm like, this dude is playing with fire right now. That's dicey.
Well, so he's done other things like that in other films, and it's actually, it's like not real. Like there's,
I've seen another floor bit where it looks like but it's just like a matte painting sitting in front of the camera kind of thing.
It's a perspective kind of thing.
Yeah. Forced perspective.
Right? Forced perspective. Yeah. I don't know if they did that on this, but
yeah, but there's some of those stunts where I'm like, I don't think you can do this any other way than practically, like trains playing on, in front of trains and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's him or it might be Buster Keaton that does the whole house falling down around him on bit. Like, that's terrifying.
I think it's him. I think it's him, right?
Let me Google.
Where he has to stand on this certain place and then the window falls around him. Yes.
So, okay. No, that's Buster Keaton, but
okay.
But that's his team, right? Like that's all of them, bro. Oh my God.
It'll kill you, man. That's
talk about
crazy.
Trust. That's insane.
Unbelievable. And also a lot of times, like in films today, we would just use edits and cutaways and stuff to make it look more dramatic.
Yeah.
But there's almost no edits when he does his physical comedy, and they're wides. So you're watching his entire body doing these things where he's hitting someone, he's running, he's falling, he's, throwing himself through a window. He's, he's really hitting people too. That's the other thing. Like, when he, so it's unreal, like what they did back then.
Yeah. And I wonder if they even had long lenses to some extent, just because the precision is really difficult, but you also need so much light to expose the film that the longer you make your lens, the harder it is, to let a bunch of light get in without having incredible optics. And I just imagine, that kind of optical precision was challenging at a minimum. But genius. I loved it. I'm really glad we watched it. I feel like I would struggle to watch like Modern Times because that's a pure silent film. I think there's a little nonsensical dialogue sprinkled in here and there, but I don't know if I could last an entire, unless maybe if I saw it like at the Draft House and they had like an organ player, I could probably last through it.
Oh,
there.
that'd be cool.
That would be cool.
That'd be cool.
I would love to see Prince Ahmed. I think it's called Ahmed. That's the first animation, and it's and you're supposed to watch it with an organ player in the room, and I think sometimes Draft House does it, but I haven't seen it lately, and so I've always wanted to go to that, but. Yeah, glad we did this, man. I freaking loved it. There were very few moments where I wasn't into it, and it might just be the same exact moment that you described, the hot mustard. I was like, all right, we get it, guys. It's mustard.
Flailing around. Yeah, other than that, I was 95% into it, and I loved it. And I don't care that the speech was out of place at the end. It was necessary, and you know what? If you're making something like this because you feel like the world needs it, sure, have a voice at the end. Say whatever the hell you want. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that films were, they used to show commercials. They still show commercials before films now, in most theaters, but they used to show like news before movies back then. Like movies were meant to disperse information. Wow. Also back then, and not just for entertainment. So keeping that in mind, using the end of a 2-hour film to also disperse information that you need to know, because this is trash. Like this idea is garbage. And by the way, you are a human being and you deserve more. Why not? Anyway, yeah, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant and wonderful to watch.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What are you going to recommend this week?
I'm going to recommend, and I'm just not going to say anything. Just going to recommend RRR.
Oh crap! Okay, I see you.
Just go watch it. I work with a lot of India folks that live in India, folks that are from India, and they're all amazed that it's such a world, like it's gone around the world, whatever. But I also watched a lot of like behind the scenes VFX stuff. There's like 2,600 VFX shots in this film. I just love how it is what it is, and it has no desire to explain itself or to like try to be, perfect in any way. It just is this awesome story. I adored it. It's long. It's very long.
I hope it's like 5 hours.
That's 3 hours.
Whoa. I was so exaggerating. Oh my God.
It's 3 hours.
Okay. Well,
but dude, you will love it. Some of the scenes, one of the first action scenes, I was not the first, but one of the first. I was like, I like jumped up into the air, just was so excited. I couldn't believe that this thing. You haven't watched it yet? Go watch it. Yeah,
okay, that's you and Scott both saying that. So
exactly. And Scott reminded me about it again, and then I saw they did a performance of this dance on the Oscars, and I was like, oh yeah, I got to go watch that. It's worth the 3 hours.
Holy crap. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to recommend a book you bought me for my birthday a couple of years ago when I was in San Francisco. It's called A Chronology of Film. This is why we did The Great Dictator. It just kind of popped it back into my mind. I was like, you know what? Okay, yeah. Because it talks about, this being his first talkie, and how he, debated and used his fame, whatever, to, it's dicey transitioning into a completely new style, because what if people don't like your voice? Like, that was a real thing. A lot of actors lost their heads because their voice didn't sound good on camera. And so, yeah, it's a really cool book. It's both got some nice flourishing details while also mostly staying pretty high level, so that you can breeze through it. Lots of picture references, and it's useful. Like, I don't think you would want to write a report based off this thing, but you would at the same time be able to read through it and have a really good, like, fundamental knowledge of the history of Hollywood and filmmaking across the world, not just America. Talks a lot about Japan, Kurosawa. I haven't gotten to I don't know if I've gotten to the French New Wave yet, but I'm sure I will. I hope, he's got some Wong Kar-wai in there. I expect to get to Hong Kong at some point, hopefully Korea. I mean, it's got Parasite on the cover, so you better get to Korea, South Korea specifically. I don't know if North Korea has a robust film community.
I doubt it. They don't even have internet.
Maybe not. So. But yeah, I love it. I think it's a wonderful book. It's nice to just kind of make my way through. I don't feel like a pressure to keep everything in my head, because each chapter is its own kind of thing. And it's going like year by year, starting way back, so that it kind of points out a couple of significant things that develop in every single year over the last whatever century. Wow. So yeah, it's pretty dope, man. Thank you. It's a good read. I dig it.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Awesome.
And so a little art spotlight is going to us, actually.
Yes,
releasing
we made it
this day a trailer for the short film we made when Todd was in town. It's about a busker. It's called I Won't Let Me Down. So you can go to the show notes if you're like, what do you ever make? Well, this is it. And so it's inspired by Once. And if you've seen Once, you'll instantly get, what we're going for. And so, yeah, I'm more and more, as I've probably talked about a couple of times on the show in the recent times, like more and more just loving kind of kicking against the grain when it comes to modern filmmaking style and technique. I like rubbing against the grain. Yeah. Like, I don't necessarily want to make something that looks like David Fincher or Christopher Nolan. Like, first, I don't have the budget, so I don't even want to dance into that region unless I do. And if I don't, I want to maximize my strengths instead of, trying to pretend they're not my weaknesses. And so, yeah, I'm really enjoying this style. I have other ideas that, hopefully in the coming weeks or months, I can, loop back around and start working on new stuff. Especially as I wrap up some other projects and replenish the old pocketbook. There
you go.
So
I really enjoyed making that with you, man. It was a lot of fun. You did a great job directing and filming. And producing.
And,
you did it
and
all.
running audio for a couple of days.
Yes. And also our good friend Sergio ran audio for a couple of days there. At least one.
Yeah, 2 days.
Did he mix it too?
He did the mix. Yeah.
Awesome.
Crushed it.
Yeah. And it was just fun to be on the receiving end of direction from you.
Yeah.
Which is, it's an interesting place to be because it's your project, your gear, your time, your money, and so like, I definitely wanted to bring something to it and the other actors did too. But to allow myself to be directed by you wholly, but also to be able to put my print on what I thought, would work. I thought it worked really well. And I'm like, it's a very endearing little short film that I watch it and I can watch it as not as like the actor, as just a watcher, a viewer. And it's like, oh, that's lovely.
So. It is. And I adore films with small goals. And so I've always been really hesitant to make a film with a small, intimate goal like this. And so I was really pleased that it came out the way that I wanted. Like, yeah. And so it was fun working with you too, man. I'm hoping, like, it's funny. I met with Scott earlier. We're working on a music video together. And I was like, man, I'm trying to figure out what to do for my first feature now that I've kind of shelved my script. And I'm like, man, you just made an album. I wonder if there's a way to use that as a starting point for some other project. Like, being in the studio is interesting. So I'm interested to kind of capture the same vibe that we did on I Won't Let Me Down, where it's just kind of loose, but still heading in a specific direction, and incorporate, whether that's, seeing if you want to use your music for a film, or using just the idea of being in a studio, and pulling in other people. I don't know. I've got all kinds of crazy ideas bouncing around my head, and I could easily end up making a film about a logger in, Ohio or something. Like
a lot of logging in Ohio.
Yeah. Not that there's a lot of logging going on in Ohio, but like anything. All right. Now I'm just kind of grasping at any straw that I can find that I can make for whatever, $5 or $10,000. Yeah. And so I think we'll have some fun regardless of where we end up. But yeah, if you want to check out the trailer and see what we're up to, we'll have another trailer next week as well. So yeah, stay tuned for all that bit of fun. And stay tuned for next week. We are going to take a look. You good at this? Okay. We're going to take a look at The Dark Knight. If you've never heard of it, it's a Batman movie by Christopher Nolan. Yeah, he's gearing up another film this year, and so I can't quite wait. And so let's look at one of his other films that we haven't covered yet. And we're running low on Nolan films. We've run out of Aronofsky films. I think. Well, no, there's someone else we just ran out. Oh, Denny. We ran out of Denny films.
Denny films, yeah.
Yeah, dang it. And so yeah, we might have to start digging up some other filmmakers that we haven't put under the microscope yet. I mean, we haven't even looked at Wes Anderson, so maybe we can find one of his. Yeah,
Life Aquatic.
Ooh,
let's get into that.
Life Aquatic, Rushmore. Those are my two greats. Yeah,
I was in Rushmore.
That's right.
We'll just wait. Well, I'll tell that story. It's not really a story.
We've done it all. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review. If you want to leave a note on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/The Great Dictator.
You have to roll the R when you type it in.
That's right. Great. Yeah. Yep.
And our quote of the day is from Charlie Chaplin. This is an incredible quote. The deeper the truth in a creative work, the longer it will live. Hence this film. Everything. That's the one thing that I think does make the speech at the end, like, makes it okay, is that all the satire throughout the entire film is real. As in, like, it's such a joke, that you're looking at Jewish people like this. It's such a joke that you're, the reasons we fight about things, and it's such a, this and that, it's such a joke, right? And it's just calling it a joke, like that in every way, shape, and form. He's gonna sit beneath you. He's gonna walk across. We're gonna eat mustard. Like, it just is, pointless, and it's just such a joke. And he calls it out, and it is a truth, and we identify with it as a truth. 80 years later, and now, and then the speech at the end. Obviously, we identify with that. So yeah, what a great. We could talk about this all day, I think. But thank you guys so much for joining us. It's just a lot of fun. Great suggestion to do this. Make sure to join us next week. We're doing The Dark Knight. And subscribe, review us wherever you can. It all helps. And if there's a film you'd like to see us dissect, we would love to hear from you as well. Let us know what you think about this episode. And I hope that we can take from this what's important and look at it in the way that strengthens films, because I just really think that this is the start of something else, right? Like this is I'm going to use this medium as a way to make a statement, and I just loved it. Until next week, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch the movies.